Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Kier, and joining me as always is my co host, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
We have a great episode coming up for you today. It is Wednesday, September 6th, and we are now one day away from the NFL's first regular season game. It's going to be the Kansas City Chiefs at the New England Patriots, and we are just a few days away from the NFL's opening kickoff weekend starting. Uh, First games are Sunday the 10th, and we have a game to preview, a meaningful game to preview in the Browns and the Steelers in week one out in Cleveland. But before we get to that, there's some NFL news we wanted to get to. Austin, you want to take the lead with the relocation, or I guess rescheduling rather, of the Dolphins and Buccaneers game?
Yep, the Miami Tampa Bay game that was supposed to be week one has been rescheduled because of the hurricane, or canes, because Irma's being followed by a tropical storm that's supposed to be evolve into a hurricane called Jose. And it will now be on week 11 when both their teams had a bye week. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, it's a helpful use for a bye week that sometimes things like these happen. For those who don't remember, Ben Roethlisberger's first NFL start came against the Dolphins in Miami, and that was a very poor game as far as weather is concerned. There was a lot of I think there was a hurricane, something in similar conditions, but they still played the game, and it was just an ugly, ugly game. So, rather than risk injuries and damage to players and property, it's a good thing that they did this. That's all. That's what it really comes down to.
I have to agree. I think it's unfortunate for the teams, but this is above football, and these players need to take care of their families who are living in the Miami or Tampa Bay area. Luckily, these teams aren't more than wild card teams at the most, so it won't be that important anyway. But if this was like a team like, I don't know, the Giants, the Steelers, the Patriots, this would really screw up their season a little bit. But like I said, it's family first. But moving on to the next bit of NFL news, the NFL has upheld the Ezekiel Elliott suspension, but because of how late it came, he is now eligible to play week one versus the Giants and more than likely will play. He will then be suspended games 2 through 8 because their bye week falls in between there. So technically that's 7 weeks, but it's only 6 games. What do you have to say about that?
That's dumb. I honestly thought this suspension was going to get reduced to about 3 or 4 games. I still don't think he should have been suspended at all, given the fact that the charges were dropped. But whatever, it's just another instance of the NFL really looking stupid for what they're doing. I get that they're trying to show that they're taking domestic violence seriously. Whether or not that's true or not is another thing, but I think that this just makes them look really bad. It does not look smart to be suspending someone who had their charges dropped, which I mean, I don't know. I find that to be head scratching, don't you?
Yeah, my opinion hasn't changed. This is still ridiculous that he's being punished when he isn't being charged anymore. It's the charges were dropped. The woman had like a text or call, I forget what it was, that said like no one's gonna believe you and stuff. That he was just setting him up because he's who he is. It's like the NFL is punishing him for false accusations against him. It's just not fair. But
Yeah, that's pretty frustrating. Um, I don't even know. I don't know. It's really it's disappointing for them. I'm not going to complain too much, being that I don't think either of us are fans of the Cowboys, but it's concerning if there were ever, since that could be a potential precedent that's getting set. But moving on to our next bit of news, I teased it briefly. The Chiefs and Patriots tomorrow night. What time is that kickoff? 8:15, 8:30.
I actually don't know. I'll get it well.
All right,
Like,
sounds good. I don't know. I figured we could talk a little bit about this game. If Do you have any outrageous predictions for the first game of the year?
not no. In my mind, no. It's at 8:30, by the way. So 8:30. But what I do think though is that the Patriots are going to win it. The Patriots improved while the Chiefs set up for the future. It just feels like the Chiefs, as soon as the draft started and the offseason happened, they were really just preparing for like, okay, we need to get ready for the future. With drafting Patrick Mahomes in the first round, trading their first round pick next year for just to move up or whatever it was to get Patrick Mahomes. And it just doesn't feel like I can't think of a Kansas City offseason addition that was really meaningful for this team. It just feels like they're about to go into rebuilding mode next year, and they're going to start this year. They're just going to start going downhill now.
They started they lost Jeremy Maclin and they lost some of their picks trading up for Mahomes. Is he the backup to start?
He is the backup. Alex Smith is still going to be starting.
I mean, it's a pretty decent defense, but we know decent is not nearly enough to defeat the Patriots. I don't know. I think the Chiefs will hang with them early, like they probably normally would have, but I think it's pretty clear the Patriots are the better team here.
No doubt.
Moving into Steelers news, we got a lot to get to. Just some quick hitters, though. These two are kind of tied into each other. The Steelers are reportedly close to an extension with Stephon Tuitt, defensive end, and fellow defensive end Cameron Hayward restructured his contract to save about $3 million in cap space this season, which I believe to be related to the Tuitt news. So it's possible. Looks like Stephon Tuitt could be locked up pretty soon. What do you think about that?
That's a good thing. I like Stephon Tuitt. I feel like he's only gotten better since he's been drafted, and he needs an extension. Him, Shazier, they're the next guys up. So I'm liking that they're trying to make room to extend him. The J.J. Wilcox signing kind of probably threw them off, but I like it. What do you think about it?
It's probably not too big of a deal that they signed Wilcox. It sounds like they're still moving right along, so I'm not overly worried about that. It's nice to see that Hayward decided to make this move in order for to potentially earn his money. So it shows that they're willing to work together and that they like working with each other. And on top of that, you have to think the Steelers could have a scary defensive line for the next few years. Although Hayward's best days might be behind him, you have to think he's still going to be an effective player. And Tuitt is only entering his prime. And then you have Javon Hargrave, who played pretty well last season as a rookie and now has pretty much the arrows pointing up for him. So it could be a good defensive line this season. So it's exciting to hear that news. Going back to the J.J. Wilcox signing, he just recently it was announced that he's going to be taking Senquez Golson's old number, which was 27, and Joe Hayden, who originally wanted that number, was going to go with the number 31 reportedly, which was Ross Cockrell's. But as reported by DK Pittsburgh Sports a couple of hours ago, Joe Hayden is actually going to be taking the number 21 from Robert Golden for cash and other reported considerations. And Robert Golden's going to be switching to the number 20. So a few years ago, this actually happened when Will Allen left the Steelers. He originally wore number 26 in his first stint with the Steelers. When Le'Veon Bell was drafted, he took that number, and Will Allen came back and wore number 20. So this isn't the first time we've seen this. So it'll be a little different seeing Golden in 20 as opposed to 21, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's just a number. That's the way I look at it.
Before you move on, I just want to say that 20 was actually Cameron Sutton's number. I didn't know you could actually take it from someone who's put on IR, but I found that out. So we don't know Sutton's number now anymore, so we'll let you know when we figure that out.
I'm sure he's switched to some other number, so like you said, we'll figure that out at some point. The Steelers have their practice squad assembled. Are you ready to hear the names on this list?
Yep.
All right, we got center Kyle Friend, tight end Jake McGee, running back Fitzgerald Toussaint, wide receivers Marcus Tucker and Justin Thomas, who was signed, linebackers Matt Galambos and Farrington Huguenin, safety Jacob Hagan, defensive end Levon Hooks, and cornerback Deshaun Phillips. Are there any names in here that kind of work as a headliner for you, or any names that stick out to you? What do you think of this group?
This group is not bad at all, to be honest. There are two definite NFL-ready starters here, in my opinion. That's Toussaint and Phillips, if necessary. So I think the Steelers have a pretty good practice squad on that alone. Other than that, Tucker's decent, and Galambos and Hagan had looked solid in the preseason. So all in all, not bad. Seems a little unnecessary, in my opinion, to have an offensive lineman there, though, with already 9 on the active roster. That's just my opinion. I feel like they could have used some other position, but what do you think of the practice squad?
I think it's a solid list of players, headlined by Fitzgerald Toussaint, a former starter in 2 playoff games for the Steelers. I thought he was good enough to make the team personally, but he did not. Outside of him are preseason standouts Marcus Tucker and Matt Galambos and Jake McGee. in addition to the trade acquisition to Sean Phillips from the Washington Redskins. It's a pretty solid list. Uh, I don't really expect to see many of these guys, if any of them, playing this year, but I do have to agree with it's a little confusing that they went with an offensive lineman, but I think the Steelers wanted to have really like one player at every position kind of covered. They got offensive line, they got defensive line, they got wide receiver, tight end, cornerback, safety, linebacker. So they got everything, but I think oh yeah, they got everything but like quarterback, I believe. So I think that's really what they wanted. So they mission accomplished as far as that's concerned. So moving on, we can actually get into the game now. So first, we'll dive right into the injury report. The Steelers had a pretty short list. Offensive tackle Gerald Hawkins was the only player on the injury report with a limited participation in practice today with a knee injury. So we'll keep that monitored for you. I don't believe he's the first tackle off the bench. I believe that's actually Chris Hubbard. So it's quite likely Hawkins was going to be an inactive anyways, so I don't think that's a big deal at this point. On the other side, the Cleveland Browns have pretty recent news as of today from practice. Myles Garrett is expected to miss a few weeks at least with an ankle injury. Other than that, we'll get into that in a little bit. But other than that, is that Bitonio?
Batonio.
Joe Bitonio has a knee injury. Nate Orchard has a groin injury. Danny Shelton has a knee injury, and Dan Vitale has an ankle injury. All of those players were limited in practice on Wednesday, but keep in mind they still have another practice Thursday and Friday. So many of those guys, or none of those guys, could be playing on Sunday. So real quickly, let's talk about Myles Garrett, the first overall pick in the draft this year. What does he not playing mean for this game?
Oh, this is going to be huge. Honestly, I really wanted to see Villanueva against Myles Garrett, and I thought that'd be an interesting matchup to see how Myles Garrett actually will perform against a pretty good tackle. I mean, you're starting against a top 10 tackle, in my opinion, so it's a good way to start. Honestly, I think the Browns lose a big part of their defense right there. A lot of the scary part of the defense was in Myles Garrett, so I think the defense gets significantly worse and the pass rush gets significantly worse because let's be honest here, the pass rush is now the same as last year's Browns team, and that pass rush wasn't good. The only other person that's new starting over there, I believe, is Jabril Peppers, and he's a safety. You don't really get safety blitzes very often, so there's not going to be a lot of pass rush productivity coming from him. So I think it's a big loss. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult loss to deal with for the Browns. I think he's their most talented defensive player, at least as far as his specific position goes. Garrett seems like the kind of dynamic pass rusher that's so rare to find in the NFL, someone like a Von Miller or J.J. Watt. Losing him definitely hurts for sure, and the Browns were already pretty short-handed on defense, and it's going to be an even tougher day since several of their other key contributors, particularly Danny Shelton, is one of their only remaining defensive players that has, legitimate NFL talent and ability along with experience, and he might not be able to play either. So we'll get to more of that in a little bit. But first, let's look at the picture yourself as Todd Haley right now. What are you looking at the Chiefs defense, and what are you thinking about going into this week 1 matchup?
The offense should be coming out firing. If I'm Todd Haley thinking about the Browns defense, I'm thinking that the Steelers should be winning this pretty handily. Every single one of the Killer Bees is on the field for the first time since Week 8 of the 2015 season. Not to mention starting against a lowly Browns defense. So let's talk about some of the specific players here. Since Ben has entered the league, he's had the Browns number having a win-loss ratio of 21-2 against the Browns. They just can't seem to pull it together against him. I don't expect that to happen this game either. Moving along to Bell, I expect Bell to be rusty here, but still have a fantastic game regardless. I think there will be a few miscommunications from not practicing with the team until September 1st, but he's still amazing and is still rushing behind a strong offensive line. So next up are the other two Killer Bees, Brown and Bryant. and they should both have a day here too. In all honesty, I think the offense is going to be unstoppable here, but we will see. The Browns could surprise me here. Uh, what is it looking like for you for the offense?
Well, if I'm Todd Haley, I'm looking at the fact that the Browns finished 31st in the NFL last year in rushing defense, and I'm licking my chops. Uh, Bell is, as we know, going to be returning from his quasi holdout and is expected to have a little rust, but I honestly don't think that's going to be a huge problem for him. I think the Steelers are going to be going to the ground early and often on Sunday, trying to loosen up the Browns' defense and kind of get them going, committed to the run, and then playing with play action off of that. Now, as far as how efficient they'll be, I actually think that the Steelers' offense is going to struggle early on, at least by what we're expecting them to do. It's as you mentioned, it's been almost nearly 2 full years since all the Killer Bees have played at the same time, and I think that it's going to take them a quarter, maybe even a half, to finally get in sync, at least through the air. And I think once they finally get going, they'll just have way too much talent to be stopped. And I think it's literally they're just going to have to get out of their own way. And once they figure out what's going on, once they make the adjustments, they won't be able to be stopped. And I think it's a potential for a 30-plus point game, which for years the Steelers have been talking about that being the average. But I think this is a good way to start it. I think you could easily put up 30-plus points against a better but hurting Browns defensive unit. On the other side of the ball, if you're Keith Butler, are you thinking positively because you got let's see 12 sacks in 2 games against the Browns last year? Are you more worried because the quarterback this time is not Josh McCown or Cody Kessler? Instead, you're playing Deshaun Kaiser, a much better athlete and maybe a more well refined Browns offense.
I'm a little more concerned for this unit. As Kaiser has never played in a regular season NFL game before, we don't really know exactly how he's going to do. But he's actually kind of set out for failure, really. So I'll take it back and say it's not much of a worry. Their top 2 receivers are Kenny Britt and Sammy Coates. Actually, it might be Sammy Coates.
It's Corey Coleman is right now their starter. I don't know if Coates will be. Coates probably won't be starting right away. He probably will at some point, but while he's just getting used to the offense, he's not going to start, would be my guess. But that doesn't mean he won't play. He's definitely expected to suit up.
Okay, so it's going to be Corey Coleman and Kenny Britt. My apologies. I don't know why when I first wrote that, I wrote Sammy Coates. And that's kind of rough. And that's going to be going up against Artie Burns, which should be fine. However, the one question mark here is Mike Hilton. He's apparently been upgraded to the nickel role and could be the number 2 cornerback. And this is going to be the first regular season game for him ever. So I'm hoping for how he performed in the preseason, but you really never know. Moving on, the pass rush actually has a challenge this week as well, since the Browns' offensive line this year is probably top 10 in the league, in my opinion, with tackle Joe Thomas, guard Kevin Zietler, center J.C. Treader, and guard Joe Bitonio. Their only real weakness comes at right tackle in Coleman, but even he doesn't seem too bad. Still, I expect the pass rush to have a bit of struggles in this game. And if there are any sacks, I expect a pretty good. If there are any sacks, they're going to be coverage sacks probably. Other than that, I expect a pretty good game from the defense, the rest of the defense as well, which actually looks like it could be a top 10 defense this year. Also, I'm excited about the possibility of Hayden versus Coates. I'm hoping Coates goes in there for a little bit and Hayden gets to guard him. I'm honestly just so excited for Hayden to make his return to Cleveland. Like, how cool is that? I find that awesome that's week 1. If you're Keith Butler, what are you thinking going into this matchup?
Well, I'm interested, Austin, because you were talking about the Browns' offensive line. Do we know the status of Joe Bitonio? Like how questionable he is for the game at this point?
Honestly, I tried looking it up because I went to the Cleveland depth chart earlier, and I couldn't find it. It sounded like he was more questionable than doubtful, if that helps.
In any case, I know that even if he plays, he's not going to be at full strength. I also know that based on several articles I've read, Kevin Zeitler has not played well in the preseason. Despite the fact that the Browns went 4-0, Zeitler did not play well. So I'm not saying that the Browns have a bad offensive line. I just think they might not be great, although they're still a solid unit. Uh, so despite all that, I think the key for the Steelers defense has to be that they need to get pressure with the four-man pass rush. And I don't know how realistic that is, but as I mentioned last year, they got 12 sacks in 2 games. The last 2 years they've had 8 sacks in games in Cleveland. So the Steelers have struggled with getting men home a lot over the past like 6 years now with just 4 men. But with two former first round picks starting on the outside, I think that the Steelers are going to be using them early and often to see if they can get to Deshaun Kaiser. And it'll be a difficult task considering Kaiser is the best Browns quarterback athlete that they've faced probably since Johnny Manziel. Granted, that was only like 2 games, but the point being that Kaiser is a good athlete and he's got the good physical tools, so they have to be careful with him. But the key is definitely going to be, can they get there with 4 men? If they can get there with 4 men, they're gonna have to. They won't have to worry about the defensive coverages. They can just sit back and let Kaiser try to beat them, which you would have to think is going to be pretty difficult. And yeah, that sounds pretty familiar to the typical Steelers defense of the last 10 to 15 years. But there's a reason it worked for a long time against poor quarterbacks, and this is the situation you want to use it in. So I think the Steelers defense will probably have a tougher day overall, but you have to like the fact that they're facing a rookie and the fact that they've had so much success on the defensive side over the last couple of years. So now that I'm sorry, did you get to your keys of the game?
Uh, I did not,
We
but
didn't do that.
we missed special teams.
That's right. I knew we were missing something. Special teams. What an interesting unit to analyze because they played so well in the preseason, but now they have quite a glaring hole.
Yeah. It's just there's not a kick returner on the team that I want to see returning kicks. I just want tons of knees. I don't want to see any returns really, unless Juju Smith-Schuster has secretly been practicing it without anyone knowing it and is secretly amazing. I don't want to see many kickoffs coming out of the end zone. And if it goes Artie Burns' way, he better just take a knee every time. The number one corner shouldn't be out there in the first place, in my opinion, but that's a story for another day. As for the Browns, their returner, Jabril Peppers, was fantastic in college, so the Steelers are going to have to keep him contained on both kickoffs and punt returns since he does both. Other than that, I have no reason to believe Barry Boswell and Canada will have a bad game. So, what's it called? I expect good things from them. And by the way, I apologize if my voice is fading. I'm a little sick, so it's starting to go right now. What if you're Danny Smith? What are you thinking about special teams?
Well, I'm not happy that the Steelers cut all of my kick returners. That's what I'm thinking. But seriously, let's think of who are the players that have returned kicks. We had Sammy Coates, now in Cleveland. We had Niall Davis and Fitzgerald Toussaint, both cut. Who else is there?
I think Eli Rogers has done it in the past, but
They
it
don't.
might have been
They,
punt returns.
they don't want him to be a kick returner. They think he's too small to do that. So yeah, Juju Smith-Schuster, Artie Burns, and Terrell Watson are the 3 guys that have been returning kicks, and none of them have any experience doing it. So, echoing Austin's point, take a knee, and just do not cough up the ball. If you have to run it out, hold on to that football and just run forward. Do not do anything special right now. Your main focus is taking care of the ball. As far as the rest of special teams go, they played well this preseason, so I'm expecting to see more of the same. So now we can get into the keys of the game. We got one offensive and defensive key for both sides on this upcoming Sunday. So, or actually, sorry, I meant to say just offense and defense. So, what's the number one key going into this game for the Steelers offense?
To stay away from Jamie Collins and Christian Kirksey. With Myles Garrett probably out, the only pieces really left to worry about are those 2 linebackers. And there are plenty of other places to throw, as the Browns don't have any other defensive weapons really besides maybe Jabril Peppers, but we'll have to see how he performs. What is your offensive key?
As opposed to what you're saying, Austin, I'm actually going to say the Steelers should run right at those guys, run right up the middle, try to bully the front 7. the Browns' strength of their defense, as you mentioned, is their outside linebackers and Jamie Collins and Kirksley. Uh, but the problem with that is the Browns still ranked near the bottom of the league in total defense, and they had Jamie Collins for most of 2016. This is not a good defense, and if you can wear these guys down with long punishing runs, they're going to want no part of these misdirection and counter plays that the Steelers love to run, particularly against the Bengals late in games that are going to be just way too much for the Browns' overmatched defensive front to handle. So I think that's the key. Get the running game going, run at those guys, and then hit them with some misdirection and plays that are going to make them run later in the game. On the defensive side, what's the key to facing the rookie Deshaun Kaiser and his new acquisition, Sammy Coates?
It's got to be to keep go routes contained. They have Kenny Britt, and now they have Sammy Coates, and both these guys are really good at running fast. So that's how I expect the Browns to try and get most of their passing yards. The Steelers will need to make sure to shut those routes down and identify them early to make sure to not give up those huge home gains that the Browns are going to be trying to go for. Do you want to go over your defensive ones again, or do you just want to move on?
No, I think I've covered everything I pretty much want to say. Like I was saying before, just get there with the four-man pass rush. The Steelers got 8 sacks last year in Cleveland, as we know, and they're facing a rookie quarterback, so don't overthink things too much on defense in this game. So now we have our X factor. We're picking one player on both sides of the ball for both teams. That's what I was thinking about earlier. This is what we wanted to do. So the Steelers offense, or I'm sorry, the Browns offense. Who's the X factor for the Browns on this upcoming Sunday?
For me, it's Duke Johnson, not Isaiah Crowell. Duke Johnson caught 53 catches for 514 yards last year, and that's dangerous. That's like a receiver coming out of the backfield. I feel like the Steelers tend to struggle with that kind of running back, a pass catcher running back that comes out of the backfield. So I'm not looking forward to him. Who is your X factor for the Browns offense?
I actually have Sammy Coates, and not because I think he's going to be featured in this offense. I just think it's because, well, there's several reasons. One, the Browns don't have a ton of options to choose from as far as an X factor, and Coates has a unique perspective on the Steelers, just like Hayden would have a unique perspective on the Browns. I suspect that Coates is going to be determined and certainly going to be amped up for the game. I think we see him run a few go routes, and who knows, maybe Kaiser can hit him once or twice, and that could be the difference between a win or a loss. Who knows? I know that Coates probably won't be playing a lot, so when he's in, he's going to be used either as a decoy or as someone they're going to be wanting to hit deep down the field. Now, on the other side, who on the Browns stands any chance of being an X factor against the Steelers offense?
I gave it to Jabril Peppers. I said his name like 6 times this podcast, but he was a rookie that I looked at pre-draft, and while the draft was going on, I was starting to hope to get him because I liked that he was a Swiss Army knife. Obviously, he went to the Browns when the Browns traded with the Texans to get to that pick, but now he's my defensive X factor, as we don't really know how he's going to perform, but I liked him pre-draft, so I think he may be the difference maker in this Browns defense. And as well as being the defensive X factor, we don't have a special teams X factor that we're going to talk about, but he kind of doubles as that because he is the returner for both punts and kickoffs. Who's your defensive X factor?
My defensive X factor for the Browns is defensive tackle Danny Shelton. And yes, there's a chance he might not play, but the fact of the matter is, with Myles Garrett out for sure, we're looking at Danny Shelton probably being the only guy in the front. That's not necessarily true. I was going to say the front seven, but he's definitely the only interior guy that is proven and has pedigree as a former number 12 overall pick. He's looking to prove something in his third season here. Now that Garrett is out, most likely, you've got Danny Shelton. He's gonna have to be carrying the load for the defensive line. And even though we know the Steelers' offensive line is pretty good, Marquise Pouncey's kryptonite has always been a bigger defensive tackle or nose guard. And Shelton is a big man at 6'2" and 335 pounds. So if he can be disruptive up the middle, it's definitely going to slow down the Steelers' offense. So that's something to look out for. Now, on the other side of the field, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers on offense. Who are they looking for? Who's going to be the X factor?
Martavis Bryant is my X factor. It's been over a year since he last played football, professionally at least. It's time to see if he really stayed in NFL shape. If he's as good as he was in 2015, this game may just be a gigantic blowout. So it's really relying on what kind of Martavis Bryant we get here. So I'm hoping we get 2015 Martavis Bryant back. But who is your Steelers offensive game changer, X factor?
I have Jesse James. This could actually be the final NFL start in the career of Jesse James. It's clear now that Vance McDonald is more than likely going to supplant James as the starter relatively soon, and James doesn't have much time left to improve his standing among both the coaching staff and the quarterback. James needs a big week, and he can prove that if he belongs, it's going to go for a long way for the offense this year. Otherwise, if he struggles, it's possible he loses his job right away, and likely we won't hear from him again as a starter. So this is a big week for James for sure. On the other side, Austin, the Steelers defense, who's their X factor in taking on DeShone Kizer and the Browns?
I gave it to Mike Mitchell. It just feels like the Steelers play better when he's out there on the field because he's such a great leader. If he's 100%, he's going to be a big part of this defense come Sunday, which is why I had to give him the X factor. Who is your Steelers defensive X factor?
New starting inside linebacker Vince Williams. For years now, he's been looking for a chance to be a full-time starter as an inside linebacker on the Steelers defense. He got that contract extension, but then rarely saw the field at the end of last year. Then he wasn't sure. They weren't sure if he was going to be a starter on the team. Timmons left. It looked like it was going to be Williams' job, but then they brought in Dante Hightower. And then all of a sudden they decided to not address the position in the draft. So they've been really wishy-washy on Williams, and it's interesting to see how he's going to be performing. He dropped some weight and is faster now than he ever has been, but will it cost him some of his strength? In any case, I'm excited to see what Williams can do with the new and improved, sleek version of Vince Williams, and I want to see if he can play as well as we think he can play, or if he is going to be the letdown that many people are worried he could be. So it's a big week for Williams for sure. And moving on, we are getting to the end of our podcast. We have bold predictions for Sunday's game. It's the first game of the year, Austin. Are there any really crazy bold predictions that you have this week?
I wouldn't say super crazy, but this first one's my favorite only because of the ending. I think there's going to be 3 interceptions of the Steelers defense, 1 to Ryan Shazier, 1 to Artie Burns, and the one I'm hoping for most. I really, really want to see it. 1 to for Joe Hayden. Even if the Steelers don't get 3 picks, which it's a bold prediction, it's not really likely. I really want Joe Hayden to get a pick just so he gets booed in Cleveland, just because he does that. He just does great. I really want Joe Hayden to do that to him. Next up, new addition Vance McDonald catches 2 touchdowns. I think that's really hard to get when he's the backup tight end. I expect a few 2 tight end sets here in this game, and I think he's gonna get 2 touchdowns. And then finally, the Browns are kept under 50 yards rushing. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. I think the Browns are going to be playing from behind the whole game, so it's going to be hard to rush. What are your bold predictions?
Much in the same way, Austin, you were just saying, I think Isaiah Crowell and the Browns' rushing offense gets shut down and abandoned early in this game, as he doesn't reach 60 yards, and I actually think he fumbles twice in this game, trying to do a little too much out of the backfield. Elsewhere, I think Le'Veon Bell doesn't miss a beat, and I know this is probably not really a bold prediction normally, but because there's questions about his playing shape and having not practiced with the team much recently, so I'm going to take advantage and predict that he's going to score 2 touchdowns and get 170-plus scrimmage yards. Like I said, that's normally not really a bold prediction with him, which is kind of crazy, but because of the question marks for him this week, I'm going to take advantage and say he does it this week. My last prediction is that DeShone Kizer, Browns quarterback, throws for less than 200 yards. Look, the Steelers' defense historically, since 2004, I believe it is, have only lost to rookie quarterbacks something like 4 or 5 times. It's not something they do often, and there's reasons for that. The Steelers' defense struggled recently a few years ago, but they seem to be rounding into form, and this could be a big year, and it's a good tune-up game for them, facing a young offense and a rookie quarterback. I think that in this game, they're going to be giving Kizer fits all game long, and I don't think he reaches 200 yards. Even though the Browns will be trying to play from behind, I think the Steelers, like I said, run the ball, keep the ball out of the hands of the Browns, and they make short work of the Browns. So that leads into my final score prediction, which I have the Steelers winning 31-17, giving up a late touchdown as the score looks a little bit nicer than it really was. What about you, Austin? What's your final scoring prediction?
My final score is going to be 38-13. It's just going to be a mess for the Browns when they lose by 25. I personally, that's that.
Hopefully, as we predict, the Steelers will start 1-0 on this brand new 2017 NFL season. The long off season is finally over. We can finally put the AFC Championship defeat to New England in the rearview mirror for good as we turn the page officially to the 2017 regular season. It starts tomorrow with the Chiefs at the Patriots for the full NFL season, and it's been a long wait, Austin, but one that might well be worth the wait this season.
I can't agree it more. It's been a long time without football. As I probably said many times, football is my only sport, and even more specifically, I can't watch college football. It's just not in me. I'm a big fan of defense, and what I noticed in a lot of college football games is there's no defense. There's scores like 56-50, and I'm just that I don't want any part of that. So it's been a really long off season for me. I am so excited to sit down and watch this game tomorrow.
Steeler Nation, we hope you're as excited as we are. And we'll be back next week to recap what will hopefully be the Steelers' season opening win against the Browns. The Steelers are finally back, and there's plenty of reason to celebrate. But before we end things, as always, I want to talk to you a little bit about our website and all of our other information. So if you like what you heard today, you have any questions about us or about what we do, who we are, or questions about the Steelers you want us to answer for you, feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on social media. We're on 3 platforms: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm not going to bother going over those usernames today. We usually say those at the end of all of our episodes, but for now I want to get more attraction to our website. Check that out. It's strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. I have links to our social media pages from there, so feel free to check that out and give us some feedback. We always love hearing or interacting with people on YouTube or SoundCloud. So don't be afraid to comment and ask us questions. We'd love the feedback. So thank you very much for all that. And Steeler Nation, good night and take care. Can't wait for this Sunday, and we hope you're as excited as we are. Take care, everybody.
Good night.